The singleton design pattern, when implemented, it ensures that the singleton object exists only once within the application code. This is most useful when managing resources, having a single point of focus for the resource management, like a database connection. In our example, we're going to demonstrate implementing a singleton object to manage a database connection. We call the class DB Connection Manager. And within that class, we follow the pattern for the singleton implementation. On line 6, we have a public static instance variable. This static instance variable will exist only once for any number of objects created of this class. However, we're going to ensure that only one object of this class is ever created. And we're going to do that by first making the constructor, the construct function, private. This means that it cannot be called from other code. This function is accessible only within the class definition. On line 27, we create a public static function, getInstance, which will return either a newly created object of type DB Connection Manager, or will return the existing object of type DB Connection Manager. On line 36, we have a public static function close that sets the handle to the database connection to null, thereby closing the connection. On line 41, we disallow any copies of this object by making the clone function private. So let's look at the constructor. To simplify this, the configuration settings for the database connection are included here as literal values. A more appropriate approach would be to read these from a configuration file. On line 12, we identify the server to which to connect, then the user and password used to connect to that server, and the database to connect to on that server. On line 17, we create an associative array containing these values and assign that to a variable connection info. On line 19, we actually create the connection to the database, in this case a SQL Server database, passing the server information as well as the connection info associative array. If all goes well, the SQL Server connect function will return a handle to the database connection. We store this handle in our public variable dbh. All of this is encapsulated within a try-catch block to ensure that any errors are captured at runtime. On line 27, the getInstance function begins by checking whether or not the instance variable, that variable that would hold the one and only instance of this object, is actually set. We use the built-in function isSet and ask this variable whether or not it has been set to a value. If it has not, notice the bang in the if statement. If this variable has not been set, then on line 31, we assign to it a new object of type DB Connection Manager, our type, the type of this class. And the reason we can do that is because the constructor for this class is accessible internally to the class. And that object handle is stored in our instance variable. So this code on line 31 will only execute once. Any subsequent calls to getInstance will discover that the instance variable is in fact set, failing the if statement and dropping to line 33, returning the existing instance variable. So how might we use this in our code? We've created a very simple web page. On line 4, we include the singleton class file. then two SQL Server specific variables that are required for the query to the database. Then our select statement on line 11, a simple select count from our sales order header table. So the test here is not of the SQL statement, and really not even of the SQL connection. The test is of the singleton object. So we have a couple different ways we can call the object. On line 14 is one of the ways we could manage this single instance of the database connection by calling getInstance and assigning the return value from that, which will be a handle to the one and only object of type DB connection. We would assign that object to a local variable, singleton DB. On line 15, when passing the connection object handle to the query function, we could use the singleton DB variable to call the public variable dbh from the singleton class, then pass our SQL statement and the necessary SQL Server specific arrays and get our result. But there's a shortcut. On line 17, we see that we can call the get instance within the query function call. There's no reason to store a handle to the one and only object locally in our code. Instead, we call getInstance, which returns the handle to the one and only object. Use that handle to call the public singleton class variable dbh, which is the handle to the database connection, and then pass the SQL statement as well as the SQL Server specific arrays. On line 19, we call fetchArray and pass it the results variable to get the number of rows that are contained within the table sales order header, and we print that value out on line 21. On line 24, we're using this shortcut, concise syntax for calling the one and only object. We call getInstance. It's a static method of the class DB Connection Manager. So notice the syntax for the call. The name of the class and 2 colons, and then the name of the static function. That returns a handle to the object, the one and only object of type DB Connection Manager. We use that returned object to call the close method, which nullifies the database connection, freeing the resources. The execution of this code is trivial because the interesting part of this example is here in the definition of the singleton class, a private static variable called instance that will hold the one and only object created from this class definition. A private construct method so that we can control access to the constructor for this class. By making it private, no code can call this function directly. It can only be called from within the class. Then our static getInstance function that allows a user to call this class and get the one and only instance of the object of type DB Connection Manager.